Hey y'all, welcome back again to another episode of Healthy Design. We'll continue going through Eat Rich, Live Long. Um, and this will kind of finish up part one, and then we'll move into part two of the book next week. So today they kind of are going through more like fatty liver, metabolic syndrome, and some different things along those lines. So in the book, they say that approximately a third of the U.S. population has fatty liver. Um, Looking things up now, I see like 38% is what's reported. And I think it should be noted that before we'd refer to things as non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. Now that's called MAFLD, so metabolic associated fatty liver disease. And then the more, if that progresses on, it becomes MASH, which is metabolic associated steatohepatitis. So again, that's kind of a more severe form, and we don't want that. So one of the things they note is that obesity rates and all the related diseases related to obesity, including heart disease, have all gone up since the 70s. They make the claim that our fat intake has basically stayed the same on a calorie level. I don't know if that's true or not. There was no study cited to try to support that, and I can't find anything that says yes, we're definitely eating the same amount of fat as before. What we do know is that compared to the 1970s, we're eating a lot more calories now than we did back then. And so that could explain things. My gut feeling tells me that we're probably eating more fat, and definitely we're eating a whole lot more carbs. So I think the fat increase is probably on the smaller side, but in processed food, there's different fats and a lot of carbohydrates. That's why I think we could be eating a little bit more fat, but I know we're eating a lot more carbohydrates. Um, then they move on to metabolic syndrome. And to be diagnosed with metabolic syndrome, you have to have three or more of the following. That's low HDL, high triglycerides, increased waist size, increased blood sugar, and or increased blood pressure, so hypertension. And again, let's keep this in mind. If we increase our carbohydrates, we're going to increase our blood sugar. That's going to lead to an increase in our insulin. If that stays up long enough, that's going to lead to insulin resistance. And if that stays up long enough, it's going to have a negative impact on our hormones. And if that stays up long enough, then we're going to have this dysfunction in our weight control system. So kind of keep that progression in mind. And with low HDL and high triglycerides, that's already signaling that there's a hormone signaling issue present. So if we see those two things on the lipid panel, that's already letting you know there's some issues at play. Um, so you may be thinking, okay, well, if we have high insulin levels, why don't we just take a medication to lower the insulin? There is no medication that lowers insulin. You have the different diabetic medications that can help to lower insulin. I'm not saying they don't, but they don't directly do it. What they do is they decrease blood sugar. And so then if there's less blood sugar, there should be less need for insulin, and that's what causes that insulin to go down. It's not the medication directly doing it, it's more of this indirect effect. Um, and there was a study done just kind of following kids 6 to 19 years of age. And what it found is if they had metabolic syndrome at that age, then they were 15 times more likely to have issues with heart disease in the future. I mean, that's a huge increase compared to kids that didn't have metabolic syndrome. Um, and so then they move on to talking about fructose. And so fructose in some ways can be a little more problematic than glucose. The reason being, fructose has to be processed in the liver. It can't be processed anywhere else. If we have excess glucose in our system, it can go into muscles, be stored as glycogen in other places too. But fructose, like alcohol, has to go to the liver to be processed. This can lead to increased uric acid production. The problem with that is that can also increase some substrates that lead to fat storage. And so now we're getting that fat stored in the liver. And then the increased uric acid production can also increase oxidative stress, which can damage cells, and then that can lead to high blood pressure, that can lead to heart disease, that can lead to all kinds of different things depending on the area that's affected. So that's not something we necessarily want by any means. And we get a lot more fructose now. All the soft drinks, the high fructose corn syrup, Table sugar is 50-50. It's 50% glucose, 50% fructose. All these things can play a role, and we're definitely getting a lot more fructose now than we used to. Fruit juices too. That's not going to be very good. You're getting a lot of fructose there. Fruit, what it comes from. It's where the fructose is. It's in fruit. So at least if you're doing those, try to add some fiber, because when you eat the fruit, yes, you're getting fructose in, but it's not quite as concentrated, and you've got fiber that can kind of help out. With the just orange juice, none of that's there. So you kind of miss out on some of the things nature put in there to help balance things. So there was a study done where you had 4 different groups. And so the groups were kept consistent with their calories. So each group had the same amount of calories each day. What differed was in the drink that they could drink. And it was only 1 liter per day. So it wasn't like this was the only drink they had, or they could drink as much or as little as they wanted to. They had that 1 liter. So one group drank water, one group drank milk, another group drank diet sodas, and the 4th group drank normal soda, so sugar-laden soft drinks. And the first 3 groups, there were no significant changes in their markers or anything like that. For the 4th group, there was. They had an increase in 25% visceral fat. Their liver fat increased 130%, and they also had an increase in their blood pressure, their triglycerides, and their cholesterol. And again, that's just from drinking 1 liter a day of that drink. Had a diet soda or drink milk, which has a good bit of carbohydrates in it, but not nearly as much as a soft drink, you didn't see all those same changes. So this brings up a good point. Increase the polyunsaturated fat and the carbohydrates, glucose and fructose. That's not a good combination. It's a good combination to have excess weight gain, diabetes, and then all these other things, but it's not a good way to be healthy. So that's a good reason to not eat processed foods or limit them. Maybe some, but try to avoid them and eat just real food. Then another study was published in 2006. Again, you had 4 different groups. You had a low-fat, very high-carb group, a moderate-fat, high-carb group, a high-fat, low-carb group, and then a high-fat, very low-carb group. And they did a maintenance for these people for 3 weeks, so their weight stayed the same. Then they moved into a weight reduction, so they decreased calories by 1,000 per day, which is a pretty huge jump. And then they had another weight maintenance phase kind of after that, like kind of letting things stabilize. And they noticed the biggest improvements in the highest fat groups. And they noticed those improvements within 3 weeks. For the high carb groups, there was no improvement until the weight loss occurred. So they didn't notice anything in the 3 weeks, but then once they lost enough weight, then you started to see some improvement in different markers. One thing that should be noted too, though, is the highest carb group, the results they got after 9 weeks was only half of what the highest fat group got after 3 weeks. So again, that's after all of the weight loss and everything else, that they only got half the results that high fat group got without any weight loss whatsoever. It kind of shows how this can be pretty important for a lot of people. Then they moved into kind of talking about what healthy fats are. And so eating fatty fish, salmon, mackerel, those things are wonderful. Then you got different plant sources, avocados, olives, nuts, coconut, and then you got land animals. And a lot of people think that land animals, pigs, cows, etc., that it's only saturated fat, and that's not the case. There's other types of fat there too. The ratios will vary, like the percent of monounsaturated versus saturated, etc. It will be different for each animal, but still, it's a good thing to do. Oh, and one thing with this, there is a genotype, ApoE4. People that have this genotype do seem to be at a higher risk for Alzheimer's, and it does seem like this genotype may do better getting their fat from other sources other than the land animals. So for whatever reason, just the way things interact may not be the best case for them, so maybe focusing more on the plant sources and the fatty fish is a better way to go. Just throwing that in there as an aside for you guys. Then they move on to some of the popular diet plans kind of going now. And they're trying to keep this kind of general and covering a lot of bases. So, I mean, there's going to be variations here. So they're just kind of looking at more of the diet plans that are kind of along their same lines anyway. So they look at paleo, they're looking at low carb, high fat, and then basically keto. So, low carb, very high fat group. And they break it down as paleo being 30% carbohydrate, 20% protein, 50% fat. I'm sure there's a lot of people that eat paleo that are different than that. So it's not trying to say this is exactly what paleo is, but they're just using it for comparison purposes. For the low carb, high fat group, it's 20% carb, 20% protein, 60% fat. And then for the keto, low carb, very high fat, it's going to be 10% carb, 20% protein, and 70% fat. And they do mention that they prefer the low carb, high fat versus the other two. And then for themselves in particular, if they need to get into ketosis or if they want just some benefits from moving in that little bit higher fat group, then they'll extend the time in between their meals, or they might just skip a meal. And I do want to bring up kind of again the eat less, move more. Um, I know people talk about that. I mean, they talked about it as not being an effective weight loss strategy, but if they're skipping a meal, they're eating less. And that's helping them to get some different benefits and to lose some weight. So, I mean, it does work in that sense that if you eat less, you lose weight. You can't eat excess calories and lose weight. That doesn't happen. Where people really mean like this doesn't work for a diet is it might help you to lose the weight. It doesn't necessarily help you to keep the weight off. Sometimes that's because people made such drastic reductions in their calories that then those hunger pains start. And they can't take it anymore. Their willpower is gone, and so then they start eating a whole lot more again. So that's where some of the problems can be. I think another problem people have is they think they're burning so many calories and so much fat when they're exercising, lifting weights and doing cardio type activities. Most of the time, unless you're just working out really, really hard, it does not burn that many calories. People over exaggerate or overestimate how many calories they're burning. They think they're burning 500 or more. They're probably burning about 100, and that's it. So, I mean, you can see how that could lead to some problems too. I do recommend people to exercise. There's just a ton of different health benefits we get from it. I'm not saying exercise because it's going to lead to all this great weight loss and fat loss and be so effective from that standpoint, but it's going to do a whole bunch of other things. It's going to improve your health and make you feel better and just make things better. So you get brain-derived neurotrophic factor, you increase muscle mass, that can help out with longevity, help out with strength, prevent falls, leading problems later on. So I mean, there's just all these benefits from exercise that come into play. So I highly recommend doing that. As I've said before, I think there's times where we need to be kind of in a calorie abundance, and then I think there's times where we need to be in a deficit. I think our body's meant to have times of building and times where things are kind of breaking down and getting cleaned out. So I think kind of going back and forth between those at different times is kind of the best way. If you want to have problems, definitely eat an abundance of calories. So do high fat and high carb, and I guarantee you'll have different health issues. I mean, that's kind of how farmers know how to fatten animals, and they do that by giving them more grains, so a lot more carbohydrates. So that's one of the things you kind of can learn from looking at farmers. They know how to do this. Our physiology is somewhat similar, so yeah, if we start eating a whole lot more carbohydrates, it tends to kind of fatten us up too. Anyway, that's it for part 1 of the book. We'll move into part 2 next time. Hopefully this was helpful. If you guys have any questions or anything, let me know. Please like, subscribe, do all that fun stuff, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.